All right, we're working our way along in the Sermon on the Mount, and I wrote down here, if you're really listening to this sermon, you almost need steel-toed shoes, because this is one of those step-on-your-feet kind of sermons. And as a matter of fact, I'm having us go through this at Hope for the Heart, and I keep trying to tell the ones that are teaching it, because a different person teaches it every week, not to take one just little truth out of it and go off on that. Stay on the sermon. The number one mistake made when you teach something like the Sermon on the Mount is you don't let it be the whole thing. But it is. It is a package in and of itself. You don't have to wander off the page very far to illustrate it, because it is so straightforward, so easily understood. It is the perfect sermon, so you don't do it any favors if you try to find some integral truth and wear that out. And today they were talking about not retaliating when and loving your enemies and all that, and the gal went off on storge, eros, phileo and agape love, and did the whole thing on that. And I just wanted to bawl her out. But it was June, so I couldn't. But she did not follow the instructions. And she kind of wandered off, so I got up and retaught it real quick. So I also wrote down here that the words they're cutting through butter like a hot knife. I mean, they're just so easy to understand, and there was no misunderstanding that day, and there's no misunderstanding today. It's an exceptional sermon, and so we're gonna look at it, and the words need to touch us and strike at the heart of our sinful habit, because that's what this is about. I call it a log and a speck, and it's a game that Christians play. I'm gonna tell you straight up front, this is the greatest, most often committed sin in the church. This is it. This is it, right here. This is the one, and it's like a game. It's like a game show. Spin the wheel, and who are we going to pick on today? And so it's something that we commit over and over and over again. And so he's going to jump right into it. So, judging others is unattractive and unfair. Do you believe that? How do we do it?
God's already done it, right?
Somebody walks in the room and you judge them immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Looks.
Appearance, yeah, if somebody doesn't look like us, why? Because each one of us are full of prejudice. I love it when people say, I'm not prejudiced. I want to say, everybody's prejudiced.
God is.
Everybody. Yeah, everybody is. Read Romans 14:4 for me. I got it right here. What does it say?
Who are you to condemn
Yeah.
someone's servant, else's servants?
Yeah, who are you? I love this. Who are you to condemn someone else's servants? Their own master will judge whether they stand or fall. And with the Lord's help, they will stand and they will receive his approval. He goes on in the next verse after that and basically says, don't think you're anything because you're nothing. So Paul, after telling him not to judge, goes back to a theological truth about us. We are no better than the next person. We are people. The only thing that makes us any kind of anything is the love of God, and nothing else does. So the way we do it is we have roast people for lunch. People come to church and then they talk about everybody later, and everybody's fodder for conversation, It goes on and on and on. And it gets painful. It gets painful when you kind of know, and people say, well, nobody will ever know we talked about it. I'm sorry. You get a group of people in there. I know Kelly's talking about me. Did you see the guilt? Did you see the guilt on her face? But it happens, you know, I mean, sometimes people just quit talking when you walk in. And you realize, oh, I think I was being roasted. Maybe I'll leave and you all can finish. Jimmy Draper used to tell me all the time. He said, always be 15 minutes late for a deacon's meeting. And always leave 15 minutes early. And I said, why? He said, that gets them to contain their complaint to the deacon's meeting. He said, they'll complain about you before you get in there. Then you get in there, and then after you leave, the other group will complain about you, and then everybody will go home. But it won't have hurt anybody because they'll all done it together. And you know what I used to think? Nah. But then I started going to deacons meetings, and I thought, that's exactly what happens. You know, we got to talk him into this, you got to talk him out of that. What's he thinking about that? You know, I mean, and then, you know. So, that's how we do it. We know how we do it. Matter of fact, some of us are expert at playing this game. We're expert at spinning the wheel, and whoever it lands on, we just rip through them. And somehow, humanly, that makes people feel better about themselves. Have you ever recognized that somebody had something against you and you didn't know what it was? And for the longest time, they kind of held on to something and you weren't even aware of it. And then all of a sudden they come up to you and they start telling you everything and you're just kind of, huh? Does that ever happen to anybody? That happens to me all the time. All the time. You know, I remember I was in a meeting trying to support this other vice president who was in charge of donors. And they were jumping on him. And I jumped in and I said, you know, it's not his job. I mean, it's his title, but it's not his job. It's everybody's job. We're all supposed to be teamed up and taking instruction from him. But instead of doing that, we don't do that. We turn it over to him and then we ask him why it's not done. And so I'm defending the guy. 3 days later, he's in my office saying, I've been really angry at you for 3 days. I said, for what? He said, in front of strangers in that meeting, he said, you were talking about how that wasn't my job. And I said, what? I mean, and we went back over it, and I don't know what the guy heard, but it happens. And so why is it wrong? If we know we're doing it, and we're capable of doing it, and sometimes you think, it's not that bad. It's just between us. After all, we need to pray for him.
It was destroying someone's character.
Lowering your own standards. When you're judging others, if you may have done the same thing.
Or
yeah,
worse.
Or worse. Yeah.
Some of the people need to be mute. If you can't say anything good about somebody, don't say anything at all.
Yeah.
That's been true for 100 years, at least.
100,000.
My mother used to always say, if you can't say something nice about somebody, you're probably talking about Richard Nixon. That was more of a political statement on her part. But yeah, I mean, it's wrong, and we're going to see why it's wrong, because we're commanded not to do it. These are timeless, relevant counsel. So the first part is in the first part of chapter 7, verse 1, just the first part of that verse. Do not judge others. Does that sound like a suggestion?
Command.
It's a command. Jesus starts chapter 7, after everything he said, turn the other cheek, being caught up in a lesser loyalty, the Lord's Prayer and all of that. He's gotten all of that. And now he's coming to the nitty-gritty of what believers do to other believers more than they do it to lost people. They judge them. And he says, do not judge others. Then he explains it in the second half of verse 1 through verse 4. He says, and you will not be judged. You know what happens when you have a judgmental spirit? Do you think that goes unnoticed? You think other judgmental spirits don't know who you are and where you are and how you think? I mean, if you don't want to be judged, don't judge anybody else. I mean, it's a very simple principle, and so often we are so guilty of judging one another, then we don't recognize that we have put ourselves in a position to be judged. And Jesus just says, don't do it. Don't judge others, and you won't be judged. Meaning, you'll be living the life that God has called you to live. He says, for you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. It's often very interesting to me when somebody comes sometimes and levels some sort of challenge at you about whether or not you're telling the truth. You know? And it's always interesting to me because I'm thinking, wait a minute, you're challenging that what I'm saying isn't true. Have I got that? Yeah. Okay, why would you even think that? What have I done to indicate that I would have any reason to lie to you about this or that or the other thing? And what I've come to recognize over the years, is that those are people who are struggling telling the truth themselves. And so it's easy for them to judge others on that basis, on the basis of what they know. And I've had that struggle with people. There's a man I've had that struggle with. I had that struggle with him for years and years and years. And to the point to where anytime he would begin to challenge me on something, I would just stop and look at him and I'd say, so you're having a difficult time in that area. And he'd go, what are you talking about? I said, well, I mean, the only reason you would bring that up would be that you personally are struggling with that. You want to talk about it? No. And it was like, uh-oh. And without judging him, I just instinctively could tell this is his struggle, not mine. He's trying to transfer it onto me, you know. And he, you know, that means he's capable of telling me a whale of a tale, because he's asking me if that's what I'm doing to him. And so people need help. We need to be helping each other along that, and that's what Jesus is talking about. He's talking about the standard of what's happening, the reason why that person might be doing that. You know, we really enjoy blaming other people for stuff. Have you noticed? Started in the garden. You know,
Her fault.
Adam blamed Eve. Eve blamed the snake. Snake didn't have a leg to stand on. See, you have that go on and on and on. The very essence of sin is for me to transfer blame off myself onto Stan. Stan's fault.
Stan, because he's right
Well, it's because he's right here. Because he's right here. And so that's what happens. Anytime you become unhappy or something doesn't go your way, the easiest thing to do is find a target and blame them. You know, it's easy. If I'm unhappy, really unhappy, my easiest target is to blame Donna.
So does that mean I'm blaming golf club, it's his fault, I can't hit the ball?
That's right.
That's also the stupidest thing you can do is blame Donna.
Yeah.
Poor Donna. Poor Donna.
Because what goes around comes around.
Yeah, or another way to say that, she can hold her own. And some people can take the blame and just look at you, you know. There's a lady named Brene Brown, and she's a research psychologist, and she's done a lot of research on empathy and what empathy is and how it works and all that. It's amazing, amazing research. And she does little cartoons to illustrate it. And one of the cartoons she does is about blaming. And she does TED Talks and all that. And she says, we blame because it's like a game, and it takes all the responsibility of us and places it on somebody else. And in her little cartoon, her husband called, he plays water polo, and he told her he's gonna play. And she said, okay, we'll be home by 10 because I can't go to sleep till you're home. Well, he got home at 11. And so the next morning, he kissed her goodbye, went off to work, and she was headed for her second cup of coffee, right? And she grabbed her second cup of coffee and turned and stumbled and lost it out of her hand, and the whole cup of coffee went all over her white suit and hit the ground and broke. And her first response was, that darn Steve. In an instant, she was able to think through, he kept me up an hour later, ergo the second cup of coffee. And because I had to have a second cup of coffee, it is now spilled, this is all his fault. And so she calls him for one purpose, to blame him. And she starts blaming him, and he hangs the phone up. So, but that's what we do, that's the way we behave. He goes on in verse 3 and he says, and why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye, when you can't even see past the log that is in your eye? This is a great illustration, and that's one of the other things that makes the sermon so great. He gives you this truth, tells you the standard of judgment, tells you that it's wrong, says don't judge people, you're going to be judged, you're going to get the same standard by which you judge people. That is a scary thought in and of itself. Think about how judgmental you are and how many people you've talked about and the things that you have said about them. And I mean, that's what I'm telling you, this is like all over us. And then realize, okay, that's what I got coming back. That standard. That's why I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised when I can tell somebody walks up to me and tells me some judgment they've made of me. It doesn't surprise me, because I'm thinking, well, I'm just getting my standard back. And I need to watch my standard and remember God's standard. I had a lady walk up to me, I'm standing down front at Prestonwood during the invitation, got my Jesus look on, you know. She walks up to me and grabs my hand and gets up real close, like she's gonna ask me to pray for her. And she looking down, and I said, what is it? She looks up at me and she said, I've hated you from the moment you arrived.
Wow.
And I said, oh? I said, I'm sorry.
Not.
And I said, what do you want me to do with that? You want me to pray? And she goes, no, God told me just to come up and tell you.
It was confession.
And I said, okay, well, that's really good, you were obedient. And she looked at me and said, that's it? And I said, I think it is. And she said, see, this is why I hate you. And turned around and walked away. And I thought, okay. And the idea is, I mean, it sounds absurd, but it's not. that is like what happens all the time. It just doesn't happen out loud. She just said something out loud instead of just thinking it. And I thought, no reason to respond to that. Where are we gonna go with that?
See, that would mess me up for a long time. I've never had any, they may have thought that, I've never had anybody say it.
Yeah.
That would be, that's just mean.
But
There's
she
no
gave you
point
no
in that.
reason, huh?
No, I didn't want one. I mean, I think, honestly, I thought she was gonna hit my one feeling, but she missed it. And, because you just sort of learn in ministry that people will attach things to you that really you're not responsible for, but
But
You're
that's probably somebody
target.
in our singles ministry, was it? Like when you were in singles, anyway.
No,
There's 3 ladies in this Bible study, and y'all are all welcome to come. It's really good, Revelation Bible study. On Wednesday mornings, 3 of them, you married. They want you to know they're still married in our singles ministry.
How many wives do you
yeah, they bring me in. I perform their ceremonies.
That's not what she said.
She knows about your other marriages, huh?
Yeah. I gotta tell you, you know, Donna and I are not Facebook people, and so one time she decided to respond on Facebook and just kind of change. She was changing we were changing our profile or something. Anyway, what she changed it to was that we got married.
That day. So
Like that day.
wow, it's about time.
Yeah, so everybody knows, we didn't know you weren't, but okay, way to go. 2 grown children, probably a good idea to get married, you know. So,
Why do it now?
yeah, really. So we don't respond on Facebook anymore. So that won't happen. So when he says in verse 4, how can you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye when you can't even see past the log in your eye? That's a verse of perception. When something comes close to your eye, it gets giant, doesn't it? I mean, like a little speck. He's talking about something very small. I thought it's so interesting that Jesus would choose this illustration of the eye, because when something gets wrong in your eye, you're a mess. I wore a contact one Sunday, and then when I got home, I thought I got it out, but I didn't get it out, and it was kind of like up here somewhere, you know? And I worked on it, and then I thought, well, I pushed it into my brain now. And my eye would get foggy, but not, you know, and I'd go look at it, and I'd pour water in it. I tried everything I knew to try, and nothing was happening. And I thought, oh, this is horrible. I'm gonna die with that thing in my eye, you know? And every time I blinked my eye, it hurt. You know what I'm talking about? Very irritating. And
Been there, done that.
and I'm watching something, and I blink one time, and it goes bloop, falls out. And I thought, man, that was like having a log in my eye. And it was just a little piece of it. Half of it had come out, and the other half decided to kind of hang in and scratch my eye up. But the illustration here is simply that. If I look in your eye and look really hard, sometimes I can see the debris that's on your eye. And that debris might be completely blinding you. But if you take a little tiny speck of a stick, and it's in somebody else's eye, it's just a little speck that you can go work on, that a surgeon can lay you down and he can pour water in there and pull that thing out. But if you take that same little piece of wood and stick it in your own eye, it's the size of a log, because it covers your whole eye. That's his point. You're picking at something, and while you got something so much bigger in your own eye. And it's just a brilliant illustration of what he is attempting to tell us. And so he gives us the command, don't judge, and then he gives us the explanation as to why, because we're going to have to follow the same standard we're judging people by. we're gonna be judged. And we all judge people. I mean, somebody said looks right up front, and we do, don't we? You look at somebody and they're all tatted up. What's your first impression?
Get down some roads.
Yeah. We think all kinds of things. You know, if they don't look the way we think they ought to look, if they don't smell the way we think they ought to smell, if they don't do the things that we do, it's confusing, and we are prejudiced, enormously prejudiced. Got our little neighbor across the street, and they're from Mississippi. I mean, Mississippi State graduates, right? I mean, these are Mississippi people. And the little neighbor up next to us, who's a Muslim, on Ramadan, gave them this beautiful coffee cup filled with Arabian candy, and gave one to us. And he was like blown away. And when I first saw him, he goes, "Did you get your coffee cup with that strange candy?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh, I thought only Baptists gave coffee cups away." And I said, "Yeah, it is a little strange." And he was like, he didn't know how to think about it, because he'd never been confronted by that. And I said, "Well, welcome to the big city," you know, and we just laughed. But that's the thing, we have all of our prejudices. And, you know, we'll go down the street and call people names. What, Donna?
We love them because we're gonna be in a magazine this month as Neighbors of the Month.
Yeah, they made us neighbors of the month.
Because his car quit, and Steve, with his back, pushed it into his garage. I take him food.
We're neighbors of the month. Big deal. Now they'll probably cite our yard for having too many weeds same week.
Can I get your autograph?
Yeah, sure. Where was I? So anyway,
Hebron.
then he gives us this reproof. And it's the strongest reproof so far in the sermon. Interesting that it comes after self-judging. And he says, hypocrites, first get rid of the log in your own eye, and then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. Hypocrites, deal with your own prejudice. The hypocrites, deal with your own way of thinking. Pay attention. You know, people are people. People are loved by God, doesn't matter who they are. I mean, you know, I do, the only thing I agree with related to listening to some of the Democrats is that we have demonized just about everybody that's trying to come into America, right? Through a certain kind of prejudice. And, you know, you want to turn those people away, and there's all kinds of good reasons, I get that. Got to keep people out for safety reasons, and I get all that. Those are people who have lives.
You can be a Democrat and go to heaven if you want to risk it.
Oh,
All right, get that log out.
Yeah, get that log out. Time for you to do some logging.
However, we are told that we can judge by the fruits, you know.
Yes, and the number one excuse for people who judge people in church is, I'm just a fruit inspector. You ever hear anybody tell you that?
no.
No, I am not judging anybody, I'm a fruit inspector. And I'm like, that's like a judgment person, that's what that is. And so, yeah,
There is no place in the Bible, there's apostles and prophets and teachers, there's no position open called fruit inspector.
no, but Galatians 6:1-3
Yeah.
are some suggestions for conquering this particular bad habit. See, it's a great sermon because this is a bad habit we all got, right? This like should be a, you know, a Judgers Anonymous philosophy class or something.
Well, do you think he's talking about judging everybody, or is he talking about believers judging other believers?
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah, yes to what?
see both the above.
Oh, all of you. Well,
And sometimes it's way easier to be less judgmental about a lost person than it is a brother or sister in Christ. Because a lost person, your expectation is extremely low. They're without Christ, and they have a lot to learn, and they're just living a lost world. But when you have a fellow Christian, and all you're getting back is the critical part, you kind of going, really? We're supposed to know better. We're supposed to be in love with each other. We're supposed to be lifting each other up. So this will give it balance, because he's not saying everybody's just awful at this. He's just saying this is a particular bad habit game and he's talking to church people. He's talking to the religious group of the world when he's doing this sermon. But over in Galatians 6:1-3, he says, "Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back into the right path. And be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. Share each other's burdens, and in this way, obey the law of Christ. If you think you are too important to help someone, you are only fooling yourself, and you are not that important." That's Paul thinking about this particular verse in my mind. He is saying, bear one another's burdens. Don't judge people, bear their burdens. So I got thinking about, how do you do that? Well, some of these words that he's using mean to correct like a physician. If another brother is overcome, the word could be broken by some sin. You who are godly, gently and humbly help the person back onto the right path. The language gives the idea of actually setting a broken bone for somebody. Pulling it back together for them. So we have the ability to love each other and correct each other, but we shouldn't have the opportunity to judge each other. Those are different things. So when we're doing correction, it needs to be done like a physician. And then second idea is come in gentle compassion. Come in gentle compassion. Because he does say, take the log out of your own eye and then go deal with the speck in your brother's eye. So he's not saying, well, ignore him and don't judge him. No. He's saying have an active relationship with them. And so the idea is come in gentle compassion, and then see the problem from the other person's perspective. And he talked a little bit about that when we talked about don't greet evil with evil. Don't retaliate. Pause. Every time you want to retaliate, pause. Let some time go by. Think about it. Try to figure out a different perspective that person might have, and how that person might feel. Chuck Swindoll tells a great story about this young lawyer who was single, and every year at Thanksgiving, the head guy of the law firm would bring them all in and give them a turkey. So they would all get a turkey, and he used to think, what am I going to do with a turkey? I'm single, I'm not going to cook a turkey. And every time he got a turkey, he'd take it over to his mother's, and his mother would make it. And so, but he always thought it was kind of dumb. You got to go pay homage to this guy. It's a true story. The guy lived in Dallas. So this one year, the guys in the office thought it'd be funny not to really give him a turkey. So they made this paper mache thing that felt like a turkey's body, and then they weighted it with some weights, and then they had the feathers coming out. So it looked like everybody else's turkey all wrapped up. And he gets on a bus, and he sits next to this guy who looks a little disheveled, and they have a conversation, and the guy's saying, I was looking for a job, and I didn't find a job, and and he said he wanted to give him the turkey, but he thought he didn't want to embarrass him. And he said, how much money do you have? And the guy said, got $2.38. And he said, I'll sell you this turkey for $2.38. So he sold him the turkey. And then, of course, the guys couldn't wait till Monday to find out how funny that was for him to open up a paper mache turkey. And when they told him, of course, he was mortified. And he told them the story, and all these lawyers went out and went up and down that bus line looking for this guy. Because that guy now has an opinion of that person that is unchangeable. When you think about judging somebody, think about that. That guy didn't do anything wrong. He did everything right, but it didn't work out right. A lot of times when something happens and you think somebody has done something ill will to you, and you don't look at it from their perspective, they may not have done that at all. That may not be at all what is in their heart. That's why, I kid about not being real sensitive, but you can't. You can't allow yourself as a believer to be that highly, ready to go off the rails if everything doesn't go your way. Part of Christianity is to center that. I love the end of this verse. You are not that important. If you remember any part of a verse, that's not a bad one to remember. You might think you're important, but you're not. And so you correct it like a physician. You take care. You care gently and with compassion, and you see the problem from the other one's perspective, the other person's perspective. If somebody comes after you in a vicious and a vile way, and you hadn't really done anything, your first response shouldn't be to fight or flight. It should be to get perspective. It should be to stop them and say, well, wait a minute, what's going on? What's going on with you? What are you thinking? What's hurting right now? So, 4 things. Examine your own life first. That'd be a good thing to do every time you're tempted. Every time you're tempted to judge somebody else, just take a quick examination of you. It's a great antidote. I look at somebody and, my head starts saying, oh, there's an idiot. You're going to roll with your indoor criticism. Just stop. Stop and think about your own life. And the second thing, confess your own faults before you confront another's. See, a lot of times we want to confront somebody else's faults because we have some pretty major faults and we don't want anybody to know about them. So we find somebody who's worse than us and we go attack. That's what we do. And if we would confess our own pride, our own sinful way, then it gives us perspective and it makes you kinder and slows you down a little bit to think. And then understand their struggle and be gentle in confronting. People are struggling, and you can't just always go in there and straight up just start confronting and start yelling at them. Start carrying on. Reggie will tell you one of the things in AA when a guy fumbles, and it happens. Sobriety you don't just go, okay, I quit, been sober for 28 days. Okay, I've been sober for 28 years. No, there are times when you fail along the way. And that's what makes That's what makes Alcoholics Anonymous so wonderful, because you come back in after your failure, and there's not anybody that's gonna judge you. What they're gonna do is they're gonna understand the struggle. Yeah,
Since you brought it up, Alcoholics Anonymous is based on the book of James, 1 Corinthians 13, and so on. That's where they got their original meeting format. How they
Yep.
talk to people.
Mr. Wilson. Yep. Not a bad idea. That's scriptural. Try to understand the struggle of the person, then be gentle when you confront. It's not don't ever confront. It's just get the struggle. You know, well, probably one of the greatest disciplines I've learned through counseling is when somebody starts lashing out, either at somebody else in the room or you or whatever. It's, you know, it's a real good time just to say, Lee, I know this is really hard. Sorry. I know this is painful. You know, what's going on right now? You know, and people, if you kind of take it, dial it back, you know, they're the ones with the log, recognize that, and just carefully reset the conversation. You'll be amazed what you can tell people. And the fourth thing, remember the goal is restoration, not probation. And restoration sets people free. Probation says, okay, but I'm watching you. And God didn't do that. God didn't save you and say, okay, all right, I'm watching you. You mess up, you know, bad things will happen. God never says that to us. God just keeps restoring and restoring and restoring. So, that's what Jesus had to say about the log and the speck. Again, just a masterful sermon. You'd sit down and read 5, 6, and 7, just kind of a few times during the week, all in one piece, and recognize what a magnificent sermon that must have been. Couldn't have taken more than 12, 13 minutes to deliver. I'm not nearly as good as Jesus. It takes me 40 to get rolling. So the brevity, the intelligence, just the truth and everything that's involved in it is just magnificent. It's a masterpiece. And this portion of it, no different. So let that sink in. Live with that for a little while. Matter of fact, see how long you can go before inside your head you're not making a judgment of another individual. I was driving over here and I was making a terrible judgment of a woman and her dog in a black car in front of me.
I did the same thing about the person who would go in front of me and stuff like that.
Yeah. And she was helping her dog and on the phone, and, you know, so I made a lot of judgment.
That may not be safe.
No, she wasn't. But, you know, again, I don't know her circumstances. I don't know it from her perspective. And all I had to do was slow down and let her go. You know, my desire was to judge her, stay up next to her, try to run her off the road.
She was a multitasker.
Yeah, multitasker. Okay, anybody got anything else before we get? All right.
No, one that goes along with that really well is Proverbs 6, 16 through 19, which are the 7 abominations. It God, I mean, they fall right in line with this.
Yeah. That is a great, great verse. These are abominations, and yeah, this one he hates. A proud look. You know, I'd rather be in the abomination than in what he hates.
Sean, what was that reference that you gave?
Proverbs 6, 16 through 19.
All right, let's pray. Father, thank you for this day, for your love for us, and for your continual work on us. We just thank you, God, that we can pause and that your Spirit can guide us and we can become more and more like you and exhibit your righteousness, not our own.